Hey everybody, let's get started. What did we do last week? What we did last week was we spent a lot of time talking about resources and talking about powers. And I'll get back to the resources. The powers, if you look at this guy up here, this elf with a chainsaw, you'll notice he's got three numbers under him. And the three numbers, the 10 is his attack, so how much damage does he do when he attacks? The one in the middle is his move, so how much move can he do? So you can see when I try to move him around, he's got, that's 0.5, that's 0.5, so he can move 1 in any direction. And you can always move 1 hex, so if the hex is like a 2 hex, any amount of movement will get you into the first 2 hex, but you can't go any further, right? So you can always move at least 1 hex. And then the third number is his health, his hit points. And the basic idea of the game, at its core root level is, I move guys around, I do hit points worth of damage to them, according to my attack, and they die, right? That's the heart of the game. But where it really gets interesting is that each one of these different characters have powers. And the powers are what really make the game. And originally we had thought to put the powers sort of down here in this box where all of my units are. And we were going to say you can use units or you can use powers. But when we got to thinking about it, we said, you know what? Actually, it makes more sense to have the powers attached to the units, because then I have to move the unit around. So let's say, for instance, I've got this beast mage here. If this beast mage has a certain spell, I have to actually move my beast mage over close enough to you to do something with their powers, so that because we looked at like other card games and other games like that had sort of these spells as powers, and you could play them anywhere, and that's fine because they're card games. But we're not a card game. We're a strategy game, and in a strategy game, the placement of the characters has to be important. So we made sure to move all of the powers over to the units, so that you actually have to move the units around to get things in the range of your powers. And so that was a conscious decision that we made a couple weeks ago. And so now we're in the process of putting all the powers together. And so these powers can be very simple stuff, like, my archers have the ability to shoot arrows, or my musketmen can shoot muskets. They can be slightly more complicated, so maybe a mage has a fireball that has a blast effect. Or they can be really complicated, like when this unit dies, it's replaced with another unit, or this unit can take control of another unit for 1 turn, or this unit can increase the amount of resources that are made on a space on any 1 turn. So all of these different powers have to be scripted in. And so we are now in a mad rush to get a bunch of the units made and to get a bunch of the units scripted in. And I wanted to show you how we do that in Excel, and I wish I could, but I'm having technical problems where I can't display Excel on screen. So we'll do that next week. And hopefully that's fun and interesting for everyone, and you can kind of see how a game gets built in the sort of innards of what designers do. So that was one thing that we talked about. The other thing that we talked about last week is, if you look up here at the top of the screen, we've got gold and we've got mana, and these are the 2 resources that we have in the game. And we had a really long conversation about how were we going to handle resources in this game. For those of you who played Legends of Callasia, you can remember that we had essentially 2 big resources. We had gold and we had population. And gold was, and for those of you who played Callasia, you know that we kind of hit that issue where early on in the game you didn't have enough gold to do stuff, and that was your limiting factor. And then later on in the game, your population was the limiting factor, and you had more gold than you know what to do with. If you ever play a long game of Callasia, you've almost always got more gold than you can spend, but you can't spend it because you're hitting that pop cap. And the reason that we did it that way in Callasia was because we wanted to stop steamrollering. If we didn't have that population limit in there, there is that ability for people to, once you start making, you got a bunch of territories, the territories give you a bunch of resources, the resources give you a bunch of gold, the gold allows you to buy more units, and because you have more units, you can roll over people and take them over. So that was the reason we did that to begin with. We were talking about how do we handle this problem, because it's always a problem. It's always a problem in any strategy game of how do you deal with steamrolling. You can call it steamroller. I think some people call it snowballing. It depends. It's a technical term we use. So anyway, I didn't want to do that again because I felt like in Callasia it was always it always kind of depressed me at the end of the game to look up and see like 9,999 gold, and I'm like, okay, well, this part of our game after a certain point in the game is no longer important or valuable, and that always seemed lame to me. And I wanted to make these resources meaningful throughout the whole game. And so we're coming up with a new idea that we're going to change the way it works right now. And what we're doing, there'll be gold, there'll be mana, and then there's a third thing, which is control points, right? And every unit will have a cost in terms of how much gold or mana does it cost to summon them. All of the powers that they use will have a cost in terms of how much gold and how much power it costs to use. I'm sorry, how much gold and how much mana it costs to use a power. But they'll also have a limitation on control points. So how many control points can I control at any one point, which is kind of similar to our old pop cap, right? The difference is gold and mana won't be something that accumulates turn by turn by turn. It'll be much more similar to, for instance, in Magic the Gathering. If any of you ever played that, the idea that I've got 5 forests, so each turn I have 5 forest mana to spend, and I have 3 mountains, so I have 3 mountain mana to spend, and I have that to spend on my turn. And if I don't use it this turn, it goes away and it gets replenished next turn. So that there's sort of a constant replenishing level. It's the same way that Hearthstone works. Hearthstone just has only one kind of energy. It's got the little blue gem mana thing, right? So what we're going to do is, as you take over different cities and as you take over different buildings, and in fact, as you create new units, those cities and buildings and units can increase the control points that you have available to you, which is a hard limit, right? And to do those things, I have to also get units and buildings and cities, which will provide me with gold and with mana. And that gold and that mana works as a capped resource per turn. So I may have, for instance, 10 mana and 5 gold worth of towns and cities. So for instance, if I click on this city here, we can see this is going to provide me with 1 gold and 0 mana per turn. Ignore the other stuff underneath it. This display is broken right now. But and my head was in the way. Here, wait. So wait, I can actually do this. I can cover that up. See, look. So these are the only 2 that matter, right? This 1 and that 0. And don't pretend to not see the stuff underneath it. So this building will produce 0. Wait, I can just put my head in the way. That's too much trouble. Anyway, it's going to produce that. But if I don't use it this turn, it's not like it goes in a bank and I can use it next turn. It goes away and then it's replenished fully each turn. So that's so there is a question in chat of, can I just spam the same unit over and over and over if you want? There is one other limiting factor, and the other limiting factor is the units will have a cooldown on how fast you can summon them. So let's say I summon this what is he? He's my tusked ape. So if I summon this tusked ape, he may have a cooldown, very much like if you ever played World of Warcraft. He'll have, just like any power in World of Warcraft, he'll have a cooldown of, I can't use him again for X number of turns. So yeah, I can keep summoning tusked apes, but I can only summon one every X number of turns. The other thing is we'll have special units, and those special units are, right now I'm calling them heroes. I don't know what they'll end up being called, but for the moment we're calling them heroes. And the idea of a hero is, if you've got a hero out on your out in the map, then you can't summon any more heroes. You can only have one of this guy out at any given time, and that's a special unit type. So you'll be able to, let's say, and those are going to be actually characters from the game, so they'll show up in the story and stuff. So for instance, one of the characters is Olivia, who is, for those of you who have not seen our fancy new opening screen, look, Olivia, doesn't she look good? That's Olivia up there. So Olivia is the main character from the campaign story, and she also exists as a hero unit. And that hero unit, you can only have one Olivia out going and doing stuff. So Olivia will be a little bit more powerful and a little bit more interesting, but you can only have one of her. And each one of the factions will probably only have one hero. So one of the things that you'll be citing when you figure out which factions you want to play is which heroes do you want, because if you want to play Olivia, a hero, then you're going to have to bring the Ruma faction, which she comes from.